Japan tourism is officially back in full swing. With the return of Chinese group tours, we can finally mark the end of the COVID era, as it is only a matter of time before Japan's foreign visitors returns to 100% of pre-pandemic levels. In less than a year since Japan reopened, the streets of Tokyo almost look like COVID never happened, and the country's economy is seeing a fantastic financial boost from record-breaking tourism spending. However, while the flood of tourists has been largely welcomed and been positive for the country as a whole, there have been some unintended consequences with the sheer volume of tourists returning. Excessive levels of congestion in famous cities like Kyoto and Tokyo, public transportation capacity being pushed to its limits, and most notably, the Pasmo and Suica cards being discontinued due to chip shortages are just a few unintended side effects of the massive influx of returning visitors. It's even gotten to the point that Prime Minister Kishida himself has stated he will start taking a look at implementing measures to combat over-tourism, as some people have been calling it. And in an effort to curb some of the side effects of over-tourism, Japan has taken certain measures that you need to know about, as these changes will likely have a direct impact on your upcoming trip to Japan. From the JR Pass price hike to canceling Kyoto's popular one-day bus pass, there are quite a few updates that can definitely ruin your trip if you don't know about them. So today, I'm going to cover all these recent tourism changes, my real thoughts about the whole tourism issue, and what you need to know to properly prepare and make the most out of your trip. Alright, we have a lot to unpack, so let's get this started. Tourism is almost back to pre-pandemic levels and even beginning to break all-time records. According to Japan's tourism data, Japan saw over 2 million visitors enter the country in July, which is almost 80% of visitors compared to pre-pandemic levels. And as of August, China has resumed Japan group tours, one of the main ways the country used to conduct tourism in Japan. Foreign tourism isn't the only sector that's seeing a revival either, as domestic tourism saw over 72 million people traveling throughout the summer alone. In fact, there's been so much travel from foreign and domestic tourists that the number of hotel guests in June exceeded pre-pandemic levels, with guests rising 1% above the previous record. Not all of it is necessarily good news, however, as the massive labor shortage within the hotel industry continues to be a sore issue. COVID lockdowns almost completely wiped out all the jobs within the hotel industry. In between the declining population and weak yen discouraging foreign workers to return, this severe labor shortage isn't likely to improve anytime soon. In an effort to tackle this problem, Japan has begun to heavily rely on self-check-in and check-out systems. Along with automated check-in systems, hotels are being forced to limit room availability from lack of staff and even potentially reduce cleaning and catering services. So if you combine the lack of staff with the resurgence in tourism, the biggest takeaway from this should be pretty obvious. Book your hotels well in advance. While it is possible to still get good hotels even up to the last minute, you'll have dozens of more options for better prices if you book your hotels weeks or months in advance. Plus, if you try to book a hotel last minute during a Japanese holiday you might not know about, there's a good chance you will either be forced to book a hotel with less than stellar reviews or blow the bank to stay at a luxury hotel, because those are usually the only options that will be left. Hotel companies aren't the only ones having to balance the goods and bads of tourism returning with such force, as Tokyo and Kyoto are experiencing both the benefits and unique issues that such a large volume of people brings. As popular tourist destinations become more and more crowded in Japan, cities are facing more demanding challenges as they try to handle such large volumes of visitors. One of the most notable examples is the temporary suspension of the Pasmo and Suica cards that happened just over the summer. JR East had to stop issuing regular IC cards because of the sudden and drastic increased demand outpacing the available supply, which clearly caught JR East by surprise. Local trains aren't the only form of transportation that are feeling the effects of over-tourism either. Shinkansen routes, most notably along the Tokaido stops of Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, have been experiencing extremely crowded bullet trains, with the massive influx of tourists all going to the same 3 cities. Also on the subject of overcapacity, Kyoto buses have been feeling the squeeze of overcrowding as well, as locals have reported waits up to 45 minutes long just to get on a bus because the lines are so long and the buses are so packed with tourists. Public transportation hasn't been the only issue either, as several iconic locations and attractions have been victims of vandalism and overcrowding damage, like the damaged coral reefs in Okinawa and Todaiji Temple in Nara. Even Mount Fuji saw an unprecedented level of visitors this year, causing conditions to become uncomfortable and even dangerous for climbers due to such large crowds. Due to these unpleasant side effects, local governments have been starting to make some changes to help alleviate some of these congestion problems. And while some of these changes are definitely not good news for tourists, there are also some good solutions that you will be happy to hear about as well. Starting off with one of the most notable changes for tourists so far has been the JR Pass price hike that will be taking place in October. As of October this year, the JR Pass will be getting a steep price hike as a result of many reasons, like higher energy costs, the weak yen, and yes, even overcrowding. Most notably on Shinkansen routes between Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. For decades now, the JR Pass has been an absolute steal for tourists, allowing unlimited access to Shinkansen and local trains across Japan for a dirt cheap price. However, instead of using the JR Pass to travel across the country of Japan, the majority of tourists will only use it to travel to the three most popular cities in Japan: Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, making this specific route one of the most overcrowded in all of Japan. Now, with the drastic price increase starting in October, the JR Pass will no longer be viable if tourists plan to only travel to those three cities. If you don't think you'll be buying the JR Pass after October anymore, check out this video here so you can see all the alternatives to the JR Pass. Another major change to tourism will start this month in Kyoto, as the once iconic one-day bus pass will no longer be available. The substantial overcrowding from tourists on the city buses was having an unintentional negative effect on the local residents' daily lives. Many residents use the buses for essential tasks like grocery shopping, commuting to work, or even vital hospital visits. The city's hope for abolishing this one-day pass will be to encourage tourists to try using the subway instead. While it might sound like a good idea on paper, we'll have to see if it'll actually work, or if the tourists will just stick with the buses anyways, as the bus system is definitely more convenient than the subway system in Kyoto when it comes to seeing all the major attractions. In my opinion, I think Kyoto is going to have to do a lot more to promote using the subway rather than the buses, or create another easy way for the tourists to navigate the streets of Kyoto to really see an appreciable change in the buses. Along with transportation, even iconic spots like Mount Fuji are getting throttled as a result of overcrowding. As of August this year, Mount Fuji has been restricted to a maximum of 4,000 climbers per day. Due to the sheer volume of tourists that were trying to climb the mountain every day, it was becoming unsustainable, as the mountain does not have enough bathrooms, accommodations, or room to support that many people at once. And while the climbing season for Mount Fuji this year is over, and is really the only notable place in Japan so far to put a daily cap on visitors, this could possibly become the precedent for other famous locations in Japan if they also begin to experience extreme overcrowding as well. This also means the precedent has been set for Mount Fuji, and this visitor cap could return to the mountain next year if it becomes overcrowded again and the staff deems that it is too dangerous. While this might all seem like just bad news, that is definitely not the case, as there have also been a few good measures to come from this situation as well. Major cities like Tokyo and Kyoto are putting millions of dollars of funds towards their infrastructure to help support the large volume of tourists that are returning to their country. Take Tokyo, for example, who is spending more than 26 billion yen a year to help promote tourism, increase the amount of foreigner-friendly information booths, and maintain free Wi-Fi in public areas around the city. So next time you see a tourist information booth or free Wi-Fi show up on your phone while in Tokyo, that is the city's effort to help make your trip to Japan as easy as possible. Kind of like what I do. This isn't the only good thing that local governments are doing for tourists either. In order to help tourists enjoy Kyoto without the crowds, the city has recently released a live forecast map showing the predicted congestion at the most popular tourist attractions in the city. This map has been made using data from past cell phone activity and past trends of these famous tourist hotspots, making this map a pretty accurate predictor of when these locations will either be packed shoulder to shoulder and miserable, or when they will have low volumes of visitors and be a pleasant experience. With this map, you can now effectively plan Japan, when and how you can visit all of these popular destinations without the crowds. Alright, now that we've gone over all the major changes due to Japan's tourist dilemma, it's time I provided my 2 cents about the issues of too many tourists. To be honest, I have a pretty mixed opinion about the issue from both sides. On one hand, I can understand the frustrations of locals who want to live an everyday life without tourists overcrowding their essential transportation systems. On the other hand, I also don't think it's ultimately the tourists' fault either, because they're only using the systems that they understand, going to the locations in Japan that are openly advertised on social media and by tourism agencies, and what tools are shown for them to use as a resource. But where I think the root cause of this issue lies is with the local government's inaction to solve these problems when they had the time to do it. The government had almost 3 years of COVID lockdowns to figure out ways to handle the over-tourism issues. This overcrowding issue is nothing new either, because even back in 2019, Kyoto was already voicing their concerns about crowding issues, and were in the middle of trying to figure out how they would solve these problems. But instead of using all that time to try and think of better ways to handle the over-tourism situation for when the inevitable return of tourists would come, it really doesn't look like they've done anything to properly prepare for it. Only now, when tourists are already flooding back in, are they trying to think of ways to fix it, which again is way too late for that. Another annoying part to me is that all this news about over-tourism from the local governments and locals themselves make it seem like that all this tourism is bad and needs to be scaled back. However, what really annoys me is that these are the same people who were complaining about the lack of tourism that was suffocating their economy only a year ago. Unfortunately for them, and like everything else in the world, you simply can't have it both ways. You either want the return of tourism and learn to tackle the issues of overcrowding, or you don't get any tourists and struggle with figuring out how you're gonna make a living. But I might also be getting carried away with the reaction to the tourism dilemma, as the governments and public probably do enjoy the return of tourism and the nice injection of cash from its visitors, even if these articles make it seem like they don't. But while the governments are definitely to blame for not properly planning this, it also sort of falls on the tourists too. Because of the sheer popularity of the 3 major cities amongst foreigners, Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, it seems that the majority of tourists only go to these areas. This causes the tens of millions of visitors to flood into the same 3 locations, which contributes to all these overcrowding headaches. Now that this is all out on the table, it's time to share my recommendations for you for when you visit Japan. First and foremost, my biggest recommendation to you is to explore and discover all those less traveled areas of Japan. There are literally thousands of fantastic and unique areas throughout Japan waiting for you outside of Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka, like trekking the beautiful mountains of Nagano, visiting the headquarters of Ichiran in Fukuoka, seeing the ice festival in Sapporo, and so much more. If you are a first timer to Japan, then I definitely recommend spending a day or 2 in Kyoto and a few more days in Tokyo, but then go branch out and try some of those less traveled areas in Japan. You'll see unique sights that most tourists will never see, and be able to experience it without the crowds. I've always been a fan of traveling off the beaten path, which is why I have all these videos about all these hidden and unique things to do, even right here in Tokyo, which you should check out, by the way, if you get a chance. My second recommendation to you is to not let all this negative news about over-tourism leave a bad taste in your mouth. I know that all of my viewers are the kind and respectful tourists that come to visit Japan. I mean, if you weren't a good or respectful tourist, then you wouldn't even be looking up how to properly prepare for your next trip to Japan at all, and try to learn everything about Japan before coming here. My second to last recommendation is to continue to stay up to date on all these major changes in Japan, which seem to be happening all the time. You can do this by looking up some of my other recent videos, like how to deal with the Pasmo and Suica situation, or alternatives to the JR Pass after the price increase in October. You can check both those videos out right here. And my last recommendation to you is to enjoy your trip to Japan when the time finally arrives, and make some unforgettable memories while you're here. Like this video if you found it insightful. Subscribe to stay up to date about all things Japan, and check out my affiliate links in the description below for when you plan your next trip to Japan. Alright, that's gonna do it, and until next time, I'll see you then.